The menopause really starts with the perimenopause, which is the period of a woman's life running between approximately 45 to 55 in the developed world. So it's a very lengthy period of time, and it can take several years before a woman actually realizes that that's what the diagnosis is. She may be concerned that there are other issues going on within her health. Essentially, this is a period of time when the egg reserve has declined and becomes non-existent. So the first process is that ovulation becomes less frequent and less regular, less reliable, and that in turn affects the hormonal changes during the rest of the menstrual cycle. One of the commonest side effects that women first notice is that their periods may become erratic, they can become closer together or further apart, often more painful and usually heavier. So it can be an increasingly difficult symptom for a woman to cope with. The terminology can be quite confusing, and not just for patients but for GPs as well. It's not very clear-cut in some cases. So the perimenopause, strictly speaking, is the 10 years running between 45 to 55 years of age in the developed world, where a woman is still menstruating. She may still have periods, even if they're very erratic, so there is still some hormonal activity going on. That's then followed by the menopause, which is, strictly speaking, when ovulation stops, periods cease, and the woman then becomes postmenopausal, and that then continues for the rest of her life. There is a rather loose definition that women have to have a lack of periods for 2 years up to the age of 50, and 1 year after the age of 50 to be defined as postmenopausal. But that's a somewhat old-fashioned terminology, and it's quite a loose terminology, and it's in many cases it's easier to define the menopause based on symptoms and, if necessary, blood tests. So the beginning of the perimenopause, which usually starts in the early to mid-40s, is when ovulation is no longer so regular, perhaps doesn't happen every month, starts to happen less frequently, 2 to 3 times a year or every other month. Women's periods then become more erratic, and that is associated with declining estrogen levels. And it's the declining estrogen levels which then drive the symptoms throughout her whole body. There is barely a part of the body that estrogen doesn't affect. It affects the central nervous system, the skeleton, the cardiac system, the bladder, skin, nails, hair, teeth. Everything is impacted, and it is these symptoms primarily that women come forward with during the perimenopause. There is a group of symptoms which are very common. Vasomotor symptoms, which includes flushes and sweats, which can occur during the day and night, are obviously one of the commonest symptoms that virtually everybody has heard about in conjunction with the menopause. However, more commonly nowadays, I find women are presenting with a much wider range of symptoms, particularly psychological problems, intense anxiety, even panic attacks for the first time ever, low mood, mood lability, and what women describe as brain fog, which is, it sounds quite an amusing term, but actually in real life can be quite troubling. And that's where women find just day-to-day cognitive function, focus, concentration, short-term memory are very badly affected. And finally, we've got the physical symptoms such as joint pains, aches and pains throughout the body, loss of muscle strength, muscle weakness, poor sleep, disrupted sleep, and general fatigue. So that pretty much sums up the commonest group of symptoms that I see women with. I would always recommend my patients seek help in any way that they think may be beneficial. I don't think that HRT should be used in isolation, and I would look holistically at the situation. Women should obviously keep fit, so exercise, particularly weight-bearing exercise, can be very helpful. Some women also look at other forms of complementary therapy, herbal therapies, meditation, and so on. I'm highly supportive of all those forms of treatment because there is evidence that they can be beneficial. I think women should get themselves in as fit and healthy a state as possible in their early 40s as they approach the perimenopause. The two key problems that they need to be aware of are bone loss or osteoporosis and muscle loss or sarcopenia, and there is a lot they can do themselves to prevent those. Weight-bearing exercise and, even more importantly, weight-lifting exercise is absolutely vital, and it's something that I strongly recommend to all my patients in this category. I think women need to be aware of their own bodies and their own gynecological health and symptoms. I think it's vital that women are as educated and informed as possible at this time of their lives as they approach the menopause and even the perimenopause. There is a lot of information available on the internet, social media, mainstream media, but I would recommend that women always check the sources. I think women need to be aware of their own bodies and their own gynecological health and symptoms. It's often something that women ignore, particularly in their 20s and 30s, when their focus is perhaps on fertility and childbearing, and then looking after young children as well as working. But once they reach their 40s, it is vitally important that they keep on top of screening tests such as cervical screening, for example, and mammography later on. And a lot of gynecology is dependent on self-awareness and self-knowledge about your own particular cycle and any problems which arise.